שצבענו בה באדמה חומה, כשצמאנו זרע באדמה חמה, וחפרנו בה וחרשנו בה ואהבנו.
Welcome everybody to this week's Torah 101. I welcome Jerry Lipstein. Nice to see you, Jerry. Miriam Birnbaum, nice to see you. Baruch Shulman, how are you?
All right.
Good. I'm glad to see you. And I am Peggy Pardo, and I'm presenting Torah in a very simple perspective, in a way that anybody in the world can look at it and say, I get it. I understand. This is what God, the Creator, wants from me. Of course, most people, as you said before we started this little chat, Jerry, most people do not follow the Torah. They don't know what's in it. Most people don't even believe. Well, many people don't believe in the Creator. Many have created their own gods without realizing it. It's a very natural thing to do, because the God of Israel, the God of the universe, it's not only the God of Israel, but the God of everyone, is invisible. He's spirit. We call him a he. I don't know, we could call him a they, but he's not a she and he's not a he, he's spirit. And he lives outside time. He has no beginning and he has no end, and he's impossible to understand. Because how can we begin to understand something that created us with these two holes in our head that can see, two holes in the nose that can smell, a mouth that could speak. I mean, the systems that we have are so complex and magnificent. They could never have come out of a big bang. That takes more faith than believing that there was a great architect on this planet. So, and then he gave us some regulations. He gave us order out of chaos. And that's what the Torah really is all about. And it basically is a book that is timeless. It's a book of principles. It's not a book of rules and regulations, although it does contain that. But many of the rules and regulations were for the time that it was written in, and has nothing to do with today. However, the principles of it do stand, and they can stand for all eternity because they were given to us by the Creator. So this week yes, Jerry.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment. May I?
Yes, of course.
Okay, quick. So I play chess with a little computer, and sometimes if I put it on a hard spot and it wasn't a good move, there's little spot marks undo, and I undo it. So you mentioned that I mentioned the statement previously. I may or may not have mentioned the statement, but publicly I would refrain from mentioning that how many people do or do not study. It's not for me to decide what a person, if they're not doing. I don't know what's in their heart. I would not say that any one particular individual or many are not studying, or I would refrain.
We don't
from making
know.
Public. Right.
We don't know.
I would refrain from making that public statement. So this is why I want to make a correction. I want to undo that,
Perfect. So nobody can sue you.
Sue. Sue. There's a song like that which is better. Peggy Sue,
I love you, Peggy Sue, with my love so rare and true. Oh, Peggy.
Oh, Peggy.
My Peggy Sue. Well, I love you, gal, and I want you, Peggy Sue. Well, I'm Peggy Pardo, not Peggy Sue. And I have been studying the Torah for 35 years. I studied it under a rabbi who used to be a Messianic rabbi. And a Messianic rabbi is one who believes in the Messiah. And in the Messianic world, they believe that Jesus is the Messiah. We teach something very different from the Messianic movement today. So we have sort of distanced ourselves from it. We are non-denominational in this group. We believe that God gave us principles, both Jew and Gentile. He gave us the 10 Commandments, and our job on this earth is to live them and to spread light to all the nations of the world. It's the only way that we will make any changes in this world. And we see Yeshua very differently. He was a rabbi at the time of the Romans, and he wanted to bring his people back to the Torah that Moses handed our people, so that we could fulfill our mission, so to speak, of being Or L'Goyim, a light to all the nations, including the nation of Israel. So tonight we're going to look at a double portion, Behar, which means on the mountain, meaning Mount Sinai, and Bechukkotai, a chok, is my chukim. A chok is an ordinance or a regulation that God gave us that may not have a full understanding in our minds, but we keep them because God asked us to do them. The two middle of the 10 Commandments are called chukim. Number 4 is the Shabbat, which was a sign. We don't know why he gave it to us. It's much bigger than just taking a day of rest. And the 5th one is honor your father and your mother, that our days may be long upon this earth. So those two are considered chukim. So we're going to take a look now. I'm going to share the screen, and we're going to read, actually. We read, and as we read along, anybody is free to comment. And here we go. Jerry, would you like to begin reading? I don't know if you can see it.
And the Lord spoke unto Moses in Mount Sinai, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye come into the land which I give you, then shall the land keep a Sabbath unto the Lord. 6 years thou shalt sow the field, and 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyard, and gather in the produce thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath unto the Lord. Thou shalt neither sow thy field, nor prune thy vineyard. That which groweth of itself of thy harvest thou shalt not reap, and the grapes of thy undressed vine thou shalt not gather. It shall be a year of solemn rest for the land. And the Sabbath produce of the land shall be for food for you, for thee, and for thy servant, and for thy maid, and for thy hired servant, and for the settler by thy side that sojourn with thee. Comment over here. It was mentioned at one point that the land is giving forth nutrients for all the produce. And there was a question, I don't know how valid or not, that if the lands will be able to forever nourish all the fruits and vegetables that are grown from the land. And where are we now?
You can begin with 6.
And the Sabbath produce of the land shall be for food for you, for thee, and for thy servant, and for thy maid, and for thy hired servant, and for the settler by thy side that sojourn with thee, and for thy cattle, and for the beasts that are in thy land, shall all the increase thereof be for food. Want to continue, please?
Yes. What I see here in this, because that's one thought. He's beginning. Remember, he gave us a Sabbath, the 7th day, to show that he was separating one day from the rest of the week. That day, he would give us a day of rest. Because he brought us out of the land of Egypt, where we worked 7 days a week. We were slaves. We had no rest. Here, God was saying, I'm separating one day. I've taken you out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. You're going to see how many times he repeats that. This whole idea of Egypt, we're always going to go back that idea. Here now, he's separating 1 year out of 7 for the land, because the land belongs to God. Nobody can buy the land of Israel. No matter who says the land is mine, it doesn't belong to anyone. It belongs to God. We are there. He gave it to us, but it his land. And he's telling us that we can sow it for 6 years. We can prune it. We can gather the produce. But in the 7th year, we have to leave it alone. So we have to leave the land alone in the 7th year. And we had to let, you'll see a little later, that we had to leave it for people who couldn't. Here, it says, you and your servant, your maid, all these people shall gather food from the land in that year. And we're going to come back to it and talk about it a little more later, because I want to point something out about the 7th year of the land and how important it is. When we were exiled the very first time from Israel, our people, the Israelites, were exiled by Nebuchadnezzar, took us out, destroyed the temple, brought us to Babylon. We were there for 70 years, which shows me that we did not, and one of the reasons is that we did not observe the Sabbath rest of the land. And God said, now my land will have its rest. He literally vomited us out of the land, as he said, he warned us that he would. And for 490 years, we did not observe this Shabbaton for the land, the Sabbath year of the land. If you take 7 divided into 490, you get 70. And that's how many years we were in Babylon until the gates were open for us to come back and rebuild the land when Nehemiah. But most people did not come back, maybe only 10,000. The rest remained in the area of Persia and Iraq, where they remained up until the beginning of this, the first of the century, when they were expelled again, or kicked out, and when many went back to the land again. And you shall number 7 Sabbaths of years, 7 times 7 years, and they shall be unto you the days of 7 Sabbaths of years, 49 years. Then you shall proclaim with the blast of the shofar on the 10th day of the 7th month, in the day of atonement, which is Yom Kippur. You shall make a proclamation with the shofar throughout all your lands, and you shall separate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land for all the inhabitants there. It shall be a yovel, a jubilee. You shall return every man his possession. If anyone had to sell things, they were returned. You shall return every man to his family. Sometimes a man had to sell himself as a slave or as a servant because he couldn't afford to take care of his family. But in the 50th year, God said, that's it. All your debts, everything is forgiven. Everything is restored to you. Wouldn't that be wonderful today? A yovel shall that 50th year be to you. You shall not sow nor reap whatever grows of itself, nor gather the grapes of the undressed vines, for it is a yovel, a jubilee. It shall be separated for you. You shall eat the increase out of the field. And in this year of yovel, of jubilee, you shall return every man his possession. And if you sell anything to your neighbor or buy anything from your neighbor, you shall not wrong one another. Do not defraud each other. This is what this is saying. Here's the principle. If you ever sell anything to your neighbor or buy something from him, be honest. Don't defraud him. According to the number of years after the yovel, you shall buy from your neighbor. And according to the number of years of the crops, he can sell to you. According to the multiple of years, you shall increase the price thereof. He's telling us how to figure out things that are fair. Because when you sell something to somebody, it needs to be fair. And according to the length of years, you shall diminish the price of it. for the number of crops that he sells to you. You shall not wrong one another. You shall fear your God. Remember, he's watching us all the time. We may think we're getting away with something, but God is always watching us. And there's the principle of midah keneged midah. What you get is what you give. Therefore, you shall do my statutes here, Bechukkotai, my statutes, and keep my mishpatai, my ordinances, and do them. And you shall dwell in the land in safety. When we keep his statutes and we keep his ordinance, he allows us to dwell in the land in safety. Do you think we're living in the land in safety today? Look how many enemies we have surrounding us, how many are constantly attacking us. The enemy would not be able to touch us if we were being obedient to his statutes and his ordinances. And the land shall yield her fruit, and you will eat until you have enough and dwell in safety. Again, he's our protector. And if you shall say, here, I like this. Now, this is going back to this Shabbaton, the 7th year of the land. And if you say, what are we going to eat in the 7th year? We can't sow. We can't gather in our increase. Look what God says. This is all about trusting him. Then I will command my blessing upon you in the 6th year, and it shall produce food for you. You shall bring forth produce for 3 years. In other words, in the 7th year, there'll be enough. In the 8th year, there'll be enough. And in the 9th year is when we plant again, and then there'll be enough for 3 years. You shall sow the 8th year and eat of the produce, the old store, until the 9th year, and then her produce shall come in, and you continue to eat the old store. And the land shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine. You are strangers and settlers with me. We're only allowed to live in the land. It's like we're renting from him. The land belongs to the Creator. And in all the land of your possession, you shall grant a redemption for the land. If your brother is poor and he has to sell some of his possession, then his relatives who's next to him can come and can redeem what his brother has, what their brother sold. If a man has no one to redeem it, and he becomes rich and finds sufficient means to redeem it, then let him count the years of the sale and restore the surplus, the profits, to the man to whom he sold it, and then he shall receive his possession. God is telling us how to be just, how to be fair. But if he doesn't have enough to get it back for himself, then what he sold shall remain in the hand of the person who bought it until the year of the Yovel, until that 50th year. And in the Yovel, it shall go out and be returned to him. Now, if a man sells a house in a walled city, and then he can redeem it within a whole year after it is sold, he can change his mind. For a full year, he shall have the right of redemption. But if it be not redeemed within the space of a full year, then the house that is in the walled city shall be made, it's a contract in perpetuity to him who bought it throughout his generations, and he cannot get it back in the Jubilee. But the houses of the villages, which have no walls around them, that shall be reckoned with the fields of the country. They may be redeemed, and they can go out in the Jubilee. But as for the cities of the Levites, the houses of the cities of their possession, the Levites shall have a perpetual right of redemption. If a man purchase from the Levites, then the house that was sold in the city of his possession shall go out in the Jubilee. For the houses of the city of Levites are their possession among the children of Israel. But the fields of the open land about their cities may not be sold, for that is their perpetual possession. And if your brother becomes poor, and he doesn't have enough means, then you shall uphold him. Like a stranger or a settler, he can live with you. He's part of the community. God is telling us how we need to treat one another. He is a brother. He is a relative, someone close to us. And you shall take no interest or increase, but fear your God, so that your brother may live with you. And you shall not give him your money with interest, nor give him your food for profit. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan to be your God. And he's telling us how we need to behave. And if your brother becomes poor with you, and he sells himself to you, you shall not make him serve as a bondservant. In other words, he is not a slave, but he's a hired servant. In other words, if you have a factory and you hire him, you need to pay him. He's not your servant. And as a settler, he's going to be with you, and he shall work with you until the Yovel, the year of Jubilee. Then he can leave, and he and his children, and he can return to his own family, and to the possession of his fathers shall he return. In other words, from generation to generation, these things shall remain in his property. For they are my servants, who I brought forth out of the land of Egypt. He continuously tells us, and we cannot make them. They cannot be sold as bondsmen. They can no longer be slaves. You shall not rule over them with rigor, the way they did in Egypt. That's the same picture over and over again. We're going to see throughout the Torah, using the story of Egypt as our role model. But you shall fear your God. And as for your slaves, male and female, those who you have, of the nations that are around you, of them you can buy bondsmen, slaves. You can make slaves of the nations around, because God is setting us apart. God is showing us that we are no longer slaves. But in the next few chapters, he will be telling us, because slavery at that time was part of the culture. And but he's going to tell us that we had to treat our slaves with mercy, not like the slaves were treated amongst the other nations. And it was slowly over time, he would wean us away from these practices of the pagan nations. Moreover, of the children of the strangers who dwell among you, the ger, of them may you buy, and of their families who are with you, which they have begotten in your land, they may be your possession, and you may make them an inheritance for your children after you, to hold for a possession. Them you may take your bondsmen forever, but over your brethren, the children of Israel, you shall not rule one over another with rigor. And if a stranger who is a settler with you becomes rich, and your brother becomes poor next to him, and sells himself to the stranger who has settled with you, or to the offshoot, or to his family of the strange family, after that he is sold, he may be redeemed. One of his brothers may redeem him, or his uncle's son may redeem him, or anyone who is a near relative of his family may redeem him. And if he becomes rich, he may be able to redeem himself. And he shall reckon with him the person who bought him from the year that he sold himself to him unto the year of Jubilee. And the price of his sale shall be according to the number of years. According to the time of the hired servant shall he be with him. Jerry, you want to continue to read a bit?
It's 51.
Yes, please.
I'm not going to read too much. I throat a little dry.
No
51.
problem.
I'll do a few. Thank
Okay.
you. If there be yet many years, according unto them, he shall give back the price of his redemption out of the money that he was bought for. And if there remain but few years unto the year of Jubilee, then he shall reckon with him. According unto his years shall he give back the price of his redemption. Question.
Yes.
The year of Jubilee, so if you do something 50 years, you have 50 years. And if you do 10 years before the Jubilee, you have 10 years. Is that the way it works?
I would suppose so.
As a servant hired year by year shall he be with him. He shall not rule with rigor over him in thy sight. You know, some slaves, as you mentioned, not that people would want to be a slave. They may have had, if that's what they did, they may have had a relaxed life. They did their work. They had their place to sleep. They had their meals. They didn't have the stress of making a living.
Exactly.
So there's something to be said for everything. You know,
And
someone is a servant. They don't have the stress. They won't get heart attacks. They live longer than the owners.
Exactly. We see that even today. Sometimes the owner has more stress than the slave. You're absolutely right. Some people were happy to be slaves. Even today, you'll find people who are happy to work in a company, even if they're doing menial labor, but they don't have the stress that the owner of the company has with all the, so some people are happy to do that. But God is going to teach us that we need to treat them equitably.
That works also. On the other hand, I must mention this. Sometimes you have an owner, and sometimes you have people working for the owner, and the owner drove himself mad to make a business, and he's making money. And sometimes the employees could complain, look how much the owner has. But the owner is working 24 hours a day, and they work 6 out of the 8 hours. So sometimes a worker is, you go, you live your life, and you do your thing. So just to make a comment on what you said before, that, mind you, many slaves were not good, and they were beaten. So it depends. Like everything is circumstances. There's no one law for everyone.
No, but
54.
what God is going to be showing us is that we were not to beat our slaves. We were to treat them with mercy and compassion.
I'm not talking about these that we're speaking of, but I'm talking about other slaves that you hear that were beaten, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
I'm not talking about anything over here. I just brought in.
Yes, that goes against Torah.
Right. Exactly right. And if he be not redeemed by any of these means, then he shall go out in the year of Jubilee. And some slaves refused to go out. And,
yes.
And they had something put earring through their ear.
Yes, they would be taken to the door. They would put an awl through their ear and make a hole. And they would live with their masters forever.
They want to live with their masters and their families, because in certain circumstances, they were not able to take their wife and children with them, and they chose to stay there.
Yes, if the owner gave them a wife and they had children, then the owner, the wife and the children belonged to the owner. That's the way it was in those days.
Well, there's differences of opinion, like everything else, on a slave doing that and not doing that. There's differences of opinion that putting the awl through the ear, it was a good thing and not a good thing. Anyhow, that's a discussion in itself.
Exactly.
Continuing, number 54, he and his children with him. 55, for unto me the children of Israel are servants. They are my servants, whom I brought forth out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So he's making a bit of analogy here that the children of Israel are servants. And in a way, this sort of tops some of what we have been saying about servants. If you could read into this, and I must compliment you, Peggy. You seem to have a very fantastic understanding, like what I said earlier. You have a good sense of comprehension and understanding. So, but on this year particular 55, this sort of capitalizes what Hashem said, that the children of Israel are servants. So one has to, I'm sure we can have a whole discussion on just this statement. Anyhow, we'll continue if you want.
Yes. Well, when you look what a servant is, when I serve somebody, I am humbling myself, and I'm getting out of myself, and I'm giving to that other person. And when because I have been given so much by the Creator, because you can't give what you don't have. So when you're given so much by the Creator, you have a natural desire to serve others. And Israel was chosen literally to be the servants for the world. We were to serve on a silver platter the message that God gave us, to not only live it, but to love him, to show everybody who he was, and to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, and mind, and love our neighbor as we love ourselves. So we were to serve our neighbor. And it's a natural outcome of that love that we receive from our God. When you automatically want to give when you have been given so much.
And time again, you'll find a leader of people who will say, I come not for you to serve me, but I come to serve the people. Leaders. Yes. And I'm not sure how much they mean that or not, but there's certainly that statement is repeated quite often.
Yes, there are those who really are. They have a hard time living in the system that we've created. Now, the next chapter, God is, when you take a look at, again, who is God, who is the Creator, he is everything. And he doesn't want us to make other gods, which is so important because they will take us on the wrong direction. You shall make no idols. Don't put up a graven image or a pillar. That's commandment number 2. No stone figures in your land to bow down to them. For I am the Lord your God. Don't make any idols. And here is commandment 4. You shall keep my Shabbats and revere my sanctuary. I have
a question here. Peggy.
Yes.
While we say that 2 of the commandments are chukim, if I pronounce that properly, is it wrong to be able to say we find a benefit in that? I mean, I find you said like they say no reason to keep the Sabbath, but there is a reason.
There's a big reason. Sabbath. Of course, there's a reason, but we may not understand it. It's like when you, Jerry, if your child is 2 years old and you see your child going over and taking, let's say, a sharp object, and he's going to put it into the electrical socket, you know why he's not to do that. You know why. And then you take him and you say, okay, let me show you where the key goes. And you take him over to the door and he puts the key in the hole of the door. He doesn't understand why, but it's good for him. It's the same thing with these. It's much bigger. The Shabbat is much bigger than simply taking a day of rest. It's the shalom of God is far greater than we could possibly understand. And it's also the fact, he says, the Shabbat is a sign throughout all your generations that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you, who sets you apart. So it's really much bigger. It's on a higher spiritual level that we may understand, but of course it's good for us because we will live longer. The same with number 5. Honor your parents that we may live long in the land. It's for us. It's for our good. Of course it's for our good. But why did he give that? obviously it's for us, it's to understand about how can we respect and honor the Creator if we can't even honor and respect the parents who gave us life? So it's much bigger than what we see at face value. You have to dig a little deeper, and at a spiritual level, you start to understand a lot more.
If ye walk in my statutes and keep my commandments and do them, then I will give you rains in their season, and the land shall yield her produce, and the trees of the field shall yield their fruit. And your threshing shall reach unto the vintage, and the vintage shall reach unto the sowing time, and ye shall eat your bread until ye have enough, and dwell in your land safely.
And again, safely. Okay, continue.
And I will give peace in the land, and ye shall lie down, and none shall make you afraid. And I will cause evil beasts to cease out of the land, neither shall the sword go through your land. And ye shall chase your enemies, and they shall fall before you by the sword. And 5 of you shall chase 100, and 100 of you shall chase 10,000, and your enemies shall fall before you by the sword. And I will have respect unto you, and make you fruitful, and multiply you, and will establish my covenant with you. Next.
But look how he's telling us, he's giving us the formula to live safely in our land, in the land that he's placing us. If we would just do these things, he will give us peace. He will give us rain. It's all about trusting him. And we have such a difficult time trusting God. We don't trust anything. But he's telling us Israel would live in peace today if we only turn back to the Torah. And you shall eat old store long kept. He will give us provision. You shall bring forth the old from before the new. And I will set my Mishkan among you, and my soul shall not abhor you. That's very powerful. And I will walk among you. Imagine the Creator walking among us. And I will be your God, and you shall be my people. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, that you should not be their slaves. I have broken the bars of your yoke and made you stand straight, upright. But if you will not, look at the word, tishmu, guard, listen, obey me. And if you will not do all my commandments, my mitzvot, these commandments, and the only commandments, what did we have at this point? We were at the base of Mount Sinai. What did we have? The 10 commandments. That was it. If you will not do these commandments, if you reject my statutes, the last 5 of the commandments, if your soul abhors my ordinances, so that you will not do all my commandments, but if you break my covenant, my brit, he gave us a brit, he gave us the brit of shalom, he gave us the circumcision, I also will do this to you. Now, this is very frightening. I will appoint terror over you, even consumption and fever, that shall make the eyes fail and the soul to languish. You shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemies shall eat it. And I will set my face against you, and you shall be smitten before your enemies, so that they hate you. Those who hate you shall rule over you, and you shall flee when no one is pursuing you. And if you will not yet, for these things, listen to me, then I will chastise you 7 times more for your sin. And I will break the pride of your power, and I will make your heavens like iron and your earth like brass, and your strength shall be spent in vain, for your land will not yield her produce, nor shall the trees of the land yield their fruit. And if you walk contrary to me and will not listen, will not obey me, I will bring 7 times more plagues upon you according to your sins. And I will send the beast of the field among you, which shall rob you of your children and destroy your cattle and make you few in number, and your ways shall become desolate. When I read this, I think of Hitler, who robbed us of our children and destroyed everything that we owned and made us few in number, murdered 6 million of us. And if in spite of these things, you will not be corrected to me, but will walk contrary to me, then I will also walk contrary to you, and I will destroy you, even I, 7 times for your sins. And I will bring a sword upon you, that you shall execute the vengeance of the covenant, and you shall be gathered together within your cities, and I will send the pestilence among you, and you shall be delivered into the hand of the enemy. When I break your staff of bread, 10 women shall bake your bread in one oven, and they shall deliver your bread again by weight. You shall eat and not be satisfied. And if you will not, for all this, still if you won't listen to me and still continue to walk contrary to me, then I will walk contrary to you in fury, and I will chastise you 7 times for your sins. And this is horrendous. You shall eat the flesh of your sons, and the flesh of your daughters you shall eat. Now, the prophet Jeremiah spoke about how this is exactly what happened when Jerusalem was surrounded by the Romans for 2 years, and they had no food, and they ate the flesh of their own sons and the flesh of their own daughters.
Wasn't that at Babylon when they were after the invasion by, was it Nebuchadnezzar, that this happened?
I thought it was more later on at the
Maybe
time.
it was because I think
it's been repeated, because I really believe it would have happened.
One time.
Yeah, and I believe it happened during the Holocaust.
Wow.
And because I think the guilt was just too much after those who saw what we don't know what we will stoop to.
Right.
But and we yell out at God, where were you? And we read these things, and God is telling us what he's going to do if we're disobedient to him. And it's a heartbreak. And I will destroy your high places, because we build them. We continue to build our altars and cut down your sun pillars where we worship other gods, and cast your carcasses upon the carcasses of your idols. And my soul shall abhor you. And I will make your cities a waste, and will bring your sanctuaries to desolation. And I will not smell the savor of your sweet odors. And I will bring the land into desolation. The land sat in desolation until May 1948, when we took back the land. It had been in desolation for thousands of years. And your enemies that dwell in it shall be astonished at it. And you I will scatter among the nations, which is why we're sitting here in Canada. We are among the nations. And I will draw out the sword after you, and your land shall be a desolation, and your cities a waste. Then shall the land be paid her Shabbats, as long as it lies desolate, and you are in your enemies' lands. Then shall the land rest and repay her Shabbats, because we didn't do it. And God will give his land Shabbat, so he kicks us out. As long as it lies desolate, it shall have rest, even the rest which it had not in your Sabbaths, when you dwelt upon it. And as for those who are left of you, I will send a faintness of heart in the lands of their enemy, and the sound of a driven leaf shall chase them. And they shall flee as one flees from the sword, and they shall fall when no one pursues. I know what that feels like, to live in such despair and fear when no one's chasing you and you think someone's there, the anxiety that hits.
And I can understand that.
You totally can understand it. And they shall stumble one upon another, as it were before the sword, when no one pursues. And you shall have no power to stand before your enemies. It's not our army that brings us power. It's God who does. And you shall perish among the nations. How many of us perished through every nation that we lived in Spain and in Turkey and in Egypt and Iraq and Syria and all over in Germany and Austria. The land of your enemies shall eat you up. And those who are left of you shall pine away in their iniquity, in your enemies' lands, and also in the iniquities of their fathers shall they pine away with them. And they shall confess their iniquity and the iniquity of their fathers in their treachery, which they committed against me, and also that they have walked contrary to me. I will also walk contrary to them and bring them into the land of their enemies. And if then, perhaps, their uncircumcised heart will be humbled, and they then be paid the punishment of their iniquity, then will I remember my covenant, which I made with Jacob, and my covenant which I made with Isaac, and my covenant which I made with Abraham, I will remember, and I will remember the land. For the land shall lie forsaken without them. And everybody saw that when our land was so desolate. And it shall be paid her Shabbats while she lies desolate without them. The land cannot flourish without our people. And they shall be paid the punishment of their iniquity, because they rejected my ordinances. This is why this is happening. Because us, the Israelites, we reject his ordinances, and our soul abhors his statutes. Yet for all that, when they are in the land of their enemies, I will not reject them, neither will I abhor them to destroy them utterly, to break my covenant with them, for I am the Lord their God, and I will for their sakes remember the covenant of their ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who I brought forth from the land of Egypt in the sight of the nations, that I might be their God. I am the Lord. These are the statutes and the ordinances and the laws. This is the 10 commandments, the chukim, the mishpatim, and the mitzvot, the the Torah, which the Lord made between him and the children of Israel at Mount Sinai by the hand of Moses. Wow, that is so powerful. Now we're at the chapter 27. We'll read to.
That's it.
Go
That's
ahead.
exactly that's exactly the word I was going to use, Peggy. Exactly that word. Very, very powerful. The same word. Unbelievable.
Yes, continue, Jerry.
And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, when a man shall clearly utter a vow of persons unto the Lord, according to thy valuation, then thy valuation shall be for the male from 20 years old, even unto 60 years old. Even thy valuation shall be 50 shekels of silver after the shekel of the sanctuary. And if it be a female, then thy valuation shall be 30 shekels. And if it be from 5 years old, even unto 20 years old, then thy valuation shall be for the male 20 shekels, and for the female 10 shekels. And if it be from a month old, even unto 5 years old, then thy valuation shall be for the male 5 shekels of silver, and for the female thy valuation shall be 3 shekels of silver. And if it be, and that's what they do for Pinion and Ben.
Yes.
I'm not sure. It's 5 shekels of silver, and if they don't have shekels, I think they use silver dollars.
Yes. And it's more for the male than for the female, because we were living at times when if someone were hired or sold, they could, the male with his strength had more value simply for that, not because of they were worth more of themselves as a human being, but really basically for what they could provide for work.
I wonder if you can make a comment on this valuation. I don't understand this 100% what we're talking about. The valuation as far as what is concerned, or we're going to find out as we read on.
I think we may find it as we, but basically, if we go back to see what we were reading before, if someone had to be sold, if someone was a servant or someone was hired out, these were the valuations that they were given according to the work that they could do.
Okay. What number are we at?
I
7.
think, yes.
And if it be from 60 years old and upward, if it be a male, then thy valuation shall be 15 shekels, and for the female 10 shekels. But if he be too poor for thy valuation, then he shall be set before the priest, and the priest shall value him. According to the means of him that vowed, shall the priest value him. And if it be a beast, whereof men bring an offering unto the Lord, all that any man giveth of such unto the Lord shall be holy. He shall not alter it, nor change it, a good for a bad, or a bad for a good. And if he shall at all change beast for beast, then both it and that for which it is changed shall be holy. So I'm a little tired. You think Mary wanted to read a bit too?
I'll do a few, even though my mouth is okay. Where are we?
Number
11.
11, Mary.
11. And if it be any unclean beast of which they may not bring an offering unto the Lord, then he shall set the beast before the priest, and the priest shall value it, whether it be good or bad, as thou, the priest, values it, so shall it be. But if he will indeed redeem it, then he shall add the 5th part thereof unto the valuation. And when a man shall sanctify his house to be holy unto the Lord, then the priest shall value it, whether it be good or bad. As the priest shall value it, so shall it stand. Just one thing, obviously, the priests, it's so important that they be really, really called by God and really close to God, because nowadays the equivalent, there's so much dishonesty and cheating and greed,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we just finished the book Vayikra, which means and he called. It's all about the calling, and the priest, the role of the priest at that time. He was not only the psychologist, he was the doctor, he was the link between God and the people. And we, if it had continued through the line of Aaron in a way that it was supposed to, things would be very, very different now. But sadly, greed takes over, and we don't have that connection anymore, which is quite sad. But we will again one day.
Yeah.
So I have another question I think it was last week, like who the priest is allowed to marry. And you just mentioned that the priest, the Kohen, had many many duties. I think one of the duties was in marriage and divorce as well. Is that correct? That
Yes.
you remember? Right. So there's a point was put forth that a priest was not allowed to marry a divorcee.
Right.
So one of the other things was, so he could not, he was not able to forbid have a man divorce his wife so that he might marry the woman. So that has many ramifications of what he was doing, you know.
Yes, he was held to at a higher standard, and he was to have somebody, because his work was so challenging. I mean, if you take a look at all the things that he did, he needed to be clean before God. He needed to constantly make offerings and coverings for himself before he could do it for the people. He would offer animals. He would listen to their, to why they were coming to bring their offerings. He would have to examine people who had tza'arat. There was so many things. He'd examine the house. So he needed the woman who was going to support him, because we were created to be the helpmate. The helpmate of this man needed to be also called and at a higher set at a higher standard in the way she lived a life, and really understand his role.
Right. The woman was very important. The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, when he went into the sanctuary, had to be married.
Most
not sure if you,
I believe that I believe that all the men were married.
no, but they had to be married. He could not enter. He could not enter like on Yom Kippur. He could not enter unless he was married. In fact, I recall mildly that he even had a second woman to forbid something would happen to his wife at that time. Then he would immediately marry another woman, like a standby wife, like an understudy wife was there prepared. And I'm not sure how much it is. I vaguely remember coming across that statement somewhere
in the Torah or the Talmud.
I'm not sure where at all.
Okay.
But the thing is,
because I don't think I've ever read that in the Torah.
No, the thing is, it makes sense. But you may have read in the Torah that the high priest, as a matter of fact, the two sons of Aaron, let them rest in peace. When they died, when they went in, were one of the reasons are mentioned. It was that they weren't married. So the priest had to be married to enter into the holy places, because God wants. He's making a male and a female, and he wants the male and the female to join together and accept each other.
I think these were the extra writings of the rabbis. I don't believe that's in Torah. It doesn't say any. That wasn't the reason.
Well, I'm not sure if that was the reason, but it does say somewhere, I believe, that Aaron's two sons they died. Do you recall that?
Yes, but not because they weren't married.
Well, that's one of the. They're not exactly because they weren't married. That's one of the major or minor reasons. The other ones that the reason which the Torah says, I believe, and you could correct me for sure, and I'll be welcome any correction, is that they were so enthused, they wanted to be with God, and God didn't want, if he wanted you to be with God, with him, he wouldn't put you here on earth. He wants you here on earth to do your job on earth. And so the main reason is that they wanted to elevate themselves to God immediately. And this is a side comment.
Yeah, well, I believe that would be one of the commentaries, but basically the Torah says is they offered strange fire, which God had not asked them to do. That's the simple reading of the text. And it's like it was the beginning of the priesthood. And God was showing us he was taking us out of chaos and bringing us into order. And he would be the one to set down the order. He didn't want the priesthood to begin with people doing anything that they wanted to do. He
Right.
was taking us
Exactly. We
away
had
from
this
paganism.
Exactly. We had this discussion at the beginning. I'm not sure if it's recorded or not. And we
Yes.
said we are not to second guess what God wants to do to make our own things. We have to follow exactly. Our human mind cannot assume what God wants us to do. So what is good? So we have to follow what God says. Period.
Well, he gives us enough room within his regulations. He gives us enough gray areas. It's
yes,
not all black and white.
Right. Not to say that he makes you walk the fine line exactly with no meandering, but just stick close to the line anyhow.
Exactly. Okay, Miriam, do you want to continue? You're on mute, Miriam. Do you want to continue?
We're on 15.
Yes, please.
Yeah. And if he that sanctified it will redeem his house, then he shall add the fifth part of the money of thy valuation unto it, and it shall be his. And if a man shall sanctify unto the Lord part of the field of his possession, then the valuation shall be according to the sowing thereof. The sowing of the omer of barley shall be valued at 50 shekels of silver. Just one thing, what does this say? If a man shall sanctify unto the Lord part of the field. I'm not sure what it means.
Well, it's possible that he's talking here about if a man shall sanctify to the Lord part of the field of his possession. He's going to be speaking about the tithing. So I think that part of it is to set aside, a portion to always give back, to bring back to God, to give to the priesthood.
Right, okay. If he sanctified his field from the year of Jubilee, according to thy valuation, it shall stand. But if he sanctify his field after the Jubilee, then the priest shall reckon unto him the money according to the years that remain until the year of Jubilee, and an abatement shall be made from the valuation. And he that sanctified the field will indeed redeem it. Then he shall add the fifth part of the money of thy valuation unto it, and it shall be assured to him. And if he will not redeem the field, or if he have sold the field to another man, it shall not be redeemed any more. But the field, when it goes out in the Jubilee, shall be holy unto the Lord, as a field devoted. The possession thereof shall be the priest's.
Brian, do you want to read a little bit? Can you unmute?
Brian, we're on chapter 22.
Verse 22 here, Brian. Can you read it?
Move it the other way. I can't read it now. Move it the other way. No, it's no good. I only see Hebrew. I'm cutting off the thing. You gotta move the Hebrew over to the left. Okay, hold it like that. Now we'll bring you to 22.
Okay.
And he sanctified unto the Lord a field which he had bought, which is not of the field of his possession. Then the priest shall reckon unto him the worth of that valuation unto the year of the Jubilee. He shall give thy valuation in that day as a holy thing unto the Lord.
Brian, can you turn down the sound or whatever's in the background there? Okay.
The year of the Jubilee shall return him who was bought, even to him whom the possession of the land belongeth. And all the valuation shall be according to the shekel of the sanctuary. 20 gerats shall be the shekel. Howbeit the firstling among beasts which is born as the firstling of the Lord, no man shall sanctify it, whether it be an ox or a sheep, as it is the Lord's. And if it be an unclean beast, then he shall ransom it according to thy valuation, and shall add unto the fifth part thereof. Or if it be not redeemed, then he shall be sold according to thy valuation. Notwithstanding, no devoted thing that a man may devote unto the Lord of all that he has, whether of a man of beast or of the field of his possession, shall be sold or redeemed. Every devoted thing is most holy unto the Lord. Move it up a bit. None devoted that may be devoted of men shall be ransomed. He shall surely be put to death.
Sorry, what does that mean? I
Surely
mean,
Hold on a second. Let me see. No devoted thing that a man may devote to the Lord of all that he has, whether of man or beast, or of the field of his possession, shall be sold or redeemed. Every devoted thing is most holy unto the Lord. None devoted that may be devoted of men shall be ransomed. He shall surely be put to death. I would suppose that there were things that were to be given to the priesthood, to be given to God, like a tithe, because you can see here, it's continuing on. And all the tithe of the land, whether the seed of the land or the fruit of the tree is the Lord's. It is holy to the Lord. It is to be separated for the Lord. God is showing us that he gives us everything, and we are to take a part and give it back for the use of service. If a man redeems any of his tithe, he shall add unto it the fifth part. So he's going to add an extra fifth part if somehow he has to redeem.
what's the part? What's it? So is he saying that's a kind of not unrighteousness, but
that's
disobedience? 29. None devoted that may be devoted of men shall be ransomed. He shall surely be put to death.
Yeah, exactly. What if someone says that they have put aside something to give to be devoted to God, devoted by men, they can't then go and sell it.
Okay.
It's for God. It's, remember when I think it was a couple of Shabbats ago, we were talking about how Yeshua was saying that somebody who was very religious, very orthodox, and he was saying they're supposed to take care of their parents, honor their mother and father.
Right.
And they had money put aside for their mother and father, and they said, no, we're going to give it to God instead. Yeah, they weren't doing, when you vow to give to God, you have to do it and not ransom it off because you need something else for your house.
Right. In fact, like they didn't want to take care of their parents or give them the money, so they made the excuse that they had already given some money to God.
Right. And all the tithe of the herd of flock, whoever passes under the rod, a tenth shall be holy, shall be separated to God. And he shall not inquire whether it's good or bad, nor can he change it. If he changes it all, both it and that which it's changed for shall be separated. It shall not be redeemed. These are the commandments which the Lord commanded Moses for the children of Israel. So that is the portion for this week, which is really, as you said, Jerry, as we said, pretty powerful, pretty heavy. And, we've gotten into conversations before where people have gotten very upset with me about, what God says. And I just say, don't argue with me, argue with God. God is very clear about what we are to do and what we are not to do. And
I'm taking exception to the word upset when we're discussing something, and it's not me that said it. I think if you're discussing a point of Torah, it's not upset. It's a difference of opinion, and people are trying to understand the truth. So, like it was mentioned, people say things, people get upset. People are not. I'm not talking about me, but because you just mentioned people be upset with you, I don't think they're just looking for the truth. It's not. It's like a Talmud study in a way, which you agree or do not agree with, and they're just trying to find the truth. So you don't have to. This more than anything else, a discussion of a point of the Torah is not something to be upset. It's just it's a debate. It's so it's not. It's just a debate on something.
well,
So
you
mentioned
haven't talked to some of the people I've talked to then, because let me tell you, they get upset, but
Well,
they, but they're not, it has nothing to do with me. I'm just reading what it says. I tell them, don't argue with me. Go argue with God.
The people who get upset, Peggy, you have to pray for them, because
Yes.
it's they don't understand, because no one who gets upset on a debate is really thinking properly. Like if someone does something forbid, really evil, they're insane at the time. It's an act of insanity. If someone does something, it's insane. Like people, they do things and they instantly regret it, and because they've lost their they've lost their, what do you call it? They've lost their composure, and it's just something took over, like their good inclination or their evil inclination, as we have to guard against. And so if a person gets upset, you should pray for them. I was watching a television series at one point, and it was a very nice series. People got upset, so the other people always went to them and say, "What's your problem?" It was a very, very beautiful, very beautiful series.
Sometimes you can, yes, of course we need to pray for them, but sometimes it's like, if you think of the Pharaoh, at the beginning, he had an opportunity. He could have changed his mind. He went from what my rabbi would say, he went to a point of amorality. No longer could he make the choice of doing the right thing. I mean, after 10 plagues, which almost completely destroyed his entire country, his people, his own son, he still went after our people. He took the rest of his army, the rest of his chariots, and totally destroyed them. I mean, this man did not regret what he did. His heart had become so cold, and so his heart had become hardened, as God said.
When people say that in other realms or of other subjects or other realms of activity, when they say so and so completely sold out, it's when there's no returning back.
If we recall in the Torah, I think I recall that the Lord allowed him to harden his heart.
Yes, because
he
that's not what it meant, though. It's not that he allowed him to harden his heart. There's an expression: you give a man enough rope until he hangs himself. And so he could have at any time. God is always ready for us to humble ourselves, to humble our hearts, and to turn back to him. And he was given ample opportunity to do that, but he never did. And then his heart, it's remember we talked about, you go from elasticity to plasticity. That's
like
what happened.
Yeah, it's like when you're on the road, let's say in any evil act, and you're like on a trajectory, there comes a point when there's no return. Like your own conscience, when Rav Shaul talks about your conscience being seared.
Steered.
So there's no return, like there's no room, because you've already you've sealed your actions, and that's what's going to happen. It's not that God isn't merciful, but he's saying he let him continue in what he was doing. He hardened his heart, was really saying his heart was too hard to change. He'd gotten past there's a point of no return when you're just hard, your heart is too hard to turn back.
Yeah. And I know people like that who say, just because God said that, I don't have to believe it. And I know someone who said, I will never surrender. And unfortunately, she's now so sick and she's so unable to surrender at this point. I don't know. Well, she can surrender spiritually, but her body is finished. But, there's only so far that we can allow ourselves to go. We have to stop and question and ask God, am I right in what I believe? Is it true what I'm believing? And, I do that every day. I did it this morning when I got up. Sometimes I wake up with a feeling of angst, and I don't know if it's always mine or somebody else's, because the world is in a difficult place. And I just keep saying, search me, oh God, know my heart, try me, know my thoughts, see if there's any wicked way within me, and lead me into your way everlasting, which is what Psalm 139 says. God wants us to constantly be searching our hearts. And then he enters our lives in the most miraculous of ways and finds solutions for problems that we never thought we'd have a solution for. I've watched that over and over. Jerry, do you want to say the
Yes, I do. I'm going to take a minor risk. And the risk is, because I don't have my book near me, I'm going to see if I can do it. But you must correct me, because this is.
I have the.
It's okay. It's okay. No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
This must be said correctly. So, blessed art thou, O Lord, our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with the holiness of Aaron to bless your people with love. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kirishonu b'kdushasoi shel Aaron v'tivonu levarech es amo Yisrael b'ahavo.
Amen.
Yevarechecho Adonai v'yishmorecho. Yo'er Adonai pono ve'elecho v'chunecho. Yiso Adonai pono ve'elecho v'yosem lecho shalom.
Amen.
And so shall you put my name on the children of Israel, and I will bless them.
Amen. And may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you his shalom. And with that,
While you were speaking with everyone, Peggy,
yes.
I felt you were speaking directly, besides everyone in general, to me and everyone in particular. I was, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. And
Amen.
Let's continue to pray for each other, that our lives would be, that we could be servants of the living God and live up to, not live up to his standards, because he gives us standards to live by. May we live by his standards and just be grateful and rejoice and know that he's watching over us every moment of the day. No matter what, it's we the ones who turn our face from him. So thank you again, Jerry, Baruch, Miriam, and everybody out there who's watching and listening. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.
And thank you, Peggy, for steering the ship.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. Good night.
Night.